Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Surunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Samiti Namine Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Astya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jai Om Shripad Paramahansa Paripurajaka Stotra Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Anand Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Aim Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Kunda Radha Kundi Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Gangamai Ki Jai Jamanamai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Welcome to the few, the brave. Yes. The Om Gana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Miditam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Tadhati Shapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Jatapatakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deen Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prashapanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priya Vanshakol Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Titanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you all for coming, the few, the brave. I'll start by reading a little bit from Srila Prabhupada, just because it's enlightening and auspicious to begin with. As it is necessary for one to become very active in family life, similarly, after retirement from family life, it is necessary to control the mind and senses. This is possible when one engages himself fully in the devotional service of the Lord. Actually, the whole purpose of the Vedic system, the Vedic social order, is to enable one to ultimately return home back to Godhead. Grihastha ashram is a sort of concession combining sense gratification with a regulative life. It is to enable one to easily retire in the middle of life and engage fully in austerities in order to transcend material sense gratification once and for all. Therefore, in the Vanaprastha stage of life, tapasya, or austerity, is strongly recommended. Maharaj Prithu followed exactly all the rules of Vanaprastha life, which is technically known as Vaikanas ashram. The word Vaikanas susamate is significant because in Vanaprastha life, the regulative principles are also to be strictly followed. In other words, Maharaj Prithu was an ideal character in every sphere of life. Mahajana yena gata sapanta. One should follow in the footsteps of great personalities. Thus, by following the exemplary character of Maharaj Prithu, one can become perfect in all respects while living this life or while retiring from active life. Thus, after giving up this body, one can be liberated and go back to Godhead. Mm-hmm. There's one more quotation I'll read, maybe. This affection is the very hard knot for being bound up in this material world, this affection. Therefore, the Vedic civilization is that the affection is to be cut off, compulsory, at a certain age, not that the affection should continue. If the affection continues, then there is no chance of my becoming free from this material world. There's no chance. Therefore, Vanaprastha. Because the wife's affection with the wife is very, very strong. So Vanaprastha means the husband and wife, they give up the affection and not give up, go away from home, and they travel in the holy places just to purify. And again, when the affection draws, they come to the family, again remain for 1 or 2 months, then again go away. So the wife, there's no sex connection, but wife remains as assistant to the man to be accustomed how to remain aloof from the family. And then when he has practiced to remain aloof from the family, then wife is also sent back to the family to the care of elderly children, and the man takes sannyas, compulsory. That's
just with that,
that's a lecture October 21st, 1974 in Mayapur on Bhagavatam 1.8.41. So, welcome to Apurva and Kamalini. And a whole batch of people here. Thank you for coming. I thought we'd do several things in today, and we'll see if we continue. One is, I thought that I've done a lot of talking, and I thought I would invite reflections and contributions from you. Rather, I'm not the only show in town, so I thought I would give an opportunity for others to speak and offer their reflections. So you might be thinking about what you might like to say. That's one point. The second point is I had 3 items that I thought would be, they're like action items that those who are serious about the Vanaprastha ashram could adopt. The first is, in your regular reading and hearing, just notice the things that Srila Prabhupada says about retirement and Vanaprastha life. There's quite a lot. It keeps coming up again and again. So just notice it. Just notice it. Then the second point goes along with that. Consider what Srila Prabhupada says. When you notice these statements, consider what those statements might mean to you, how they might apply in your own life. That's the second point. Think about it. Notice it, and then think about it, consider it. And the third point is to act, to do the needful, as Srila Prabhupada would say, to bring your life always closer and closer to the understanding that you've reached in point 2. By considering Srila Prabhupada's statements, you'll get some realizations, you'll get some understandings. And then the third point is, well, to act on those understandings, gradually, or quickly, to bring your life more and more in sync with what you've understood from Srila Prabhupada's teachings. That's it. Any comments or questions so far? No. Okay.
I don't know how to raise my hand in here.
You don't even have to. You can just jump right in.
Okay. Well, you know, the Srimad Bhagavatam is like the ultimate authority, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have a reading group, and we're reading about the Vanaprastha in the 11th canto. So, I mean, it's like, wow. So we're supposed to like totally disregard the Srimad Bhagavatam because all of it is like kind of outrageous. I mean, like there's already enough austerity in regular execution of Krishna consciousness. But you know how they say you're supposed to stand out in the winter and the freezing cold and under the hot blazing sun and submerged. Yeah, no dental hygiene and don't cut your nails, don't shave, don't cut your, all of these things and never save food. We shouldn't have a refrigerator or a cupboard because you just eat what you're supposed to eat that day and don't hoard any food, depending totally on Krishna. So, and of course, there's many things in the Srimad Bhagavatam that are, kind of like that. Like if people did not have purports, like how much more bewildered they would be. And if they did not have the example of our acharyas and even Lord Chaitanya himself, he was austere, but not like that. So just like you say, to notice. So Prabhupada does say a lot of things, and of course this is 11th canto. But any ideas about that?
Yeah, I have some ideas. But what do you draw from it as the central?
Well, what I draw primarily is that we are meant to be conscious of performing austerities and for minimizing the demands of the body and focusing more on spiritual life. And also, though, the example of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya and his associates, we don't hear of them doing these things because preaching is like, you could say, the austerity for this day and age, and specifically for followers of Srila Prabhupada. That's what he was emphasizing. So
Great realizations. I wouldn't have said anything better. The central point, as you said, is to accept austerities, that not to live comfortably and what's the word, complacently, but and that the best austerity is preaching. There's preaching. If we're not able to preach, our health doesn't permit, or whatever, there's chanting, there's hearing, there's preaching. This is what we're meant for, not for sort of ending our days in comfort and complacency. Thank you so much, Kamani.
Wait a second. The thing is that I was thinking today about comfort because, I've traveled quite a bit and it's so much easier in a way at home, to focus on sadhana, and now with unlimited Zoom calls every day, classes, unlimited classes. And then traveling, that's so distracting and exhausting. And it entails so much socialization, which is, nice, devotee association, appreciating association. But you know what I mean, how it could be kind of an interference, although that's an austerity to me. I think when you're young, you think traveling is lots of fun, right? But in older age, it's so much easier to chant in a more solitary place and to read, what to speak of, reading, things like that, and eating healthy prasadam when you have your own facility. If you're totally dependent, only eating temple prasadam every day, I think most of us have experienced. You know, it affects our health as well. It's often too rich or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
You raised some interesting points. One, of course, is that with Zoom and all, we can travel to all the holy places without going anywhere. We can associate with Govinda Maharaj and Indradyumna Maharaj in Vrindavan, or whoever's in Mayapur. And it's lovely. Your point about traveling is really well taken. I think, especially during these lockdown days or pandemic days, a lot of sannyasis have actually welcomed the opportunity to sit down for a while. And one of my sannyasi godbrothers was observing that travel all the time isn't always best for health, of course, or for bhajan. That sometimes to be able to travel less is more useful for the sannyasi and for the devotee and for others also. Not that every 2 days we have to be getting in an airplane and going someplace else. There's a lot to be said for you go someplace, you stay there for some time, there's a routine, there's a program, you can enlighten other devotees, share realizations with other devotees, and then move on. Not that this frenetic sort of traveling has to be the rule. Another point actually is that in the older days of sannyas, the travel from place to place was on foot, which is really a lot more, what would you say, pleasant, healthy, sattvic, everything else. You just stay in a village for some days, 1 day, 2 days, 4 days, and then you walk on to the next village. That might take you half a day, a few hours, and the walk is good for your health, and it's pleasing in many ways. Often, sometimes walking is hard also, but often it's very pleasing. And you don't have all this disturbance of the life airs from traveling up to 30,000 feet and down again and going through security 4 times and all of that kind of stuff. So that's an opportunity, by the way. The devotees who would like to travel that way, the Padayatra party is going on in India still since 86, since 1986 it's going on. And one can join that party for some time and just get a kind of a tune into that sort of way of life. That's one opportunity. When I was on Padayatra, when I was younger, there were quite a number of older people who joined in Gujarat and were traveling with that party. There was grandmothers and so on. And they had the time of their lives, really, just traveling all over India to all these wonderful places. And of course, there were arrangements and so on, so it wasn't so terribly austere, although sometimes it was rough. So that's another mode of travel for those who are inclined. But I like your point that there's something to be said for not always roaming. And one mode of Vanaprastha life is just go to one place and sit down. Go to a holy place. Go to Mayapur, go to Vrindavan, sit down there for a while. As Prabhupada said, if there, sort of the family draws us, there's some family concerns, all right, we may attend to that and then come back. Of course, when you're in Vrindavan and your family is in North Carolina, you may not be going back and forth all that much. But the idea is there that this is one way of Vanaprastha life. And that was Prabhupada's original idea for the guest house in Vrindavan. It was meant for the Vanaprasthas so that they could retire from family life, stay in Vrindavan, chant Hare Krishna, soak up the atmosphere of Vrindavan. So that's definitely one mode of Vanaprastha life. One doesn't have to travel and travel and travel. One can stay at a holy place for considerable time. Thank you again for bringing these things up. Something else from you? Or others? I'd like to invite other devotees to share their thoughts, their reflections. We've been talking about these topics now for quite several weeks. And I'm ready to retire, you know.
I was, Maharaj, this is
Yes.
Panchavadas. I was thinking about what the excellent points that Mother Kamalini was bringing up. And I was also thinking about what are seemingly extraordinary examples of renunciation and self-abnegation and so forth. And just thinking about how there's this oft-repeated pattern in Bhagavatam, which speak of Bhagavad Gita, and so forth, of we're being given the examples of ideal practices or persons of paramount virtue and paramount devotion. And one of the effects of that kind of association is that you want to make yourself a better devotee. One way or another, you think, wow, look at the amazing example being given by this Vaishnava, you know? And it's association. It can make you a better Vaishnava by hearing these stories over and over again. So.
And that's also one of the benefits of the holy places, that if we go there for a retired life, we'll associate with advanced devotees, with other devotees who've given up their, material attachments or are in the process of giving up, or with sannyasis or advanced devotees who are taking advantage of these holy places. If we go to Vrindavan, so many devotees come and give classes and give association. Similarly, Mayapur or other places also. So it's not just for the physical place, but it's that association. And we know, we talked about this in another session, that in family life, we associate with all the other families, and we take part in all these social programs and functions, and it's very nice. But in the retired life, now we can associate in a different way, associate with others who are sort of done with that, who are also retiring, or associate with those who are the brahmacharis, the sannyasis, or anyone who's sort of done with social life and is focusing more on chanting and hearing and serving or preaching. That's, again, as Kamalini said, there are different things we can do. It doesn't mean that we only have to go somewhere to retire. We can also come out and do something. Or we may do that in stages, as Srila Prabhupada did. Of course, he was preaching throughout. He was preaching in Jhansi. Then he went to Vrindavan for some time, and he was writing. He was focused on that. And then he came and went everywhere. So it's, again, this theme that you take it seriously, hear the instructions, notice them, reflect on them, and then begin to act. And the more you follow that line, the more Krishna informs you. All right, what about this? What about that? Or he arranges things. You get an invitation somewhere, or something falls apart, or whatever it may be. Krishna circumstantially helps, and he helps from within the heart, so that the person serious about going back to Godhead can successfully complete the program.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I've been thinking about in terms of this series of talks is that because I like others shy away from the reversals, but reversals come anyway. It's not that your allotment of reversals isn't going to show up simply because you're able to hide away in a comfortable home. They come anyway. The whole world is in one grand reversal right now because of a virus, because of something people can't even see. So to think that that we shouldn't stick our necks out for Krishna because something bad might happen, it's not taking the chance that we actually should take.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Right.
Yeah. And there's no security at home. There's it's not that everything will be safe and sound and hunky-dory, as they say.
Right.
So many reversals can come. And that in itself is a kind of reversal. That I'm stuck at home and just sort of plodding along and not making the progress that I'm meant for.
Yeah.
So that in itself is kind of fortune.
Yeah, Vidura had pretty strong words for Dhritarashtra in that regard.
He did. He did. More? Are there some more thoughts that we could bring forth? Some reflections from devotees? Yes, Kamalini.
Well, on a different subject, I know how you often speak about how we should cultivate a an environment of caring for the elders and all, and how our children haven't really been trained that way. And even in America, many grown children are still taking money and help from their parents. They're not helping their parents. But I came across this one verse that I thought you would like. It's description of the Varnashram system and chapter 17, canto 11. And Lord Krishna says to Uddhava, just as a ship rescues those who have fallen into the ocean, similarly, I very quickly rescue from all calamities those persons who uplift brahmanas and devotees suffering in a poverty-stricken condition.
Yeah. Krishna, very, very nice. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
He's when Krishna was, let's see, I think when he was talking to Vasudeva after killing Kamsa, he was talking to Vasudeva after killing Kamsa, if I remember, and he was sort of apologizing for not having been able to serve his natural parents because he was away in Vrindavan. There's a quotation, or there's a statement by the Lord, that anyone who's able to take care of his parents or elders, Brahmins, and so on, and fails to do so, is a dead body, although breathing. On the one side, we don't want to be dead bodies, and on the other side, we'd like to be rescued by that ship of Krishna's mercy. Thank you, I do like that. 11:17, which verse? We know it's there. Okay, it will come. Are there other thoughts or reflections that you'd like to volunteer?
You're on, Yogi.
Oh, devotees.
Can you hear me, Maharaj?
Yes.
Okay. I'm really interested in doing the right thing, and so I was discussing this point, taking up Vanaprastha at some point, my husband and I was talking to some of my friends, devotee friends, and right away they assume that there's a problem with our marriage, and they actually, I felt very discouraged. It's like I couldn't really express how I feel, and it was very discouraging talking to devotees about it.
Well, of course, you're not exactly in the renounced family capital of the devotee world. The one thought, of course, is like there is a problem with your marriage. You're both going to die. That problem is there. It's also a problem in your friends' marriages, which perhaps they're not, what shall we say?
Conscious of.
Well, not giving attention to, yes. This is the problem, that we're all going to die, and then our family life will be totally finished. And if we're just attached to family life instead of Krishna, what a failure, what a disappointment, what a waste. So it's good that we're serious about family life, responsible in family life, but then at some point we want to move on. And I think there are, what can I say? It's unfortunate, or it's to be expected, really, that devotees will, maybe that's, what shall I say, that this is a reason for this seminar, that this culture, this understanding, this direction is just not so widespread, not so well cultivated in ISKCON. We go as far as saying, yes, we want to be in the association of devotees. I think I'd like to move to a devotee community, which is wonderful. And especially for some devotees, it may really be a lifesaver. You know, they're out there struggling and no association, and they come to a community of devotees. So it's so wonderful, and they can perform service, they can join the kirtans. So it's great. But then this next stage isn't so much talked about, isn't so much recognized, is hardly visible even. And so when you bring it up, it's then people look for a context. You know, how do we, what should we understand here? Well, maybe their marriage is failing. You know, that's what they hit on, because it's like a, you know, sort of like seeing a camel. If you've lived in Alaska, it's like, how do I make sense? So that's one reason for this seminar, which you can point your friends to, or you can seek out the association of those who are similarly minded. You know, those who can't conceive of the idea that there's the next stage. All right, Hardy Bol. But there may be other devotees who are also thinking, well, you know, what's more dynamic? What can I do? How can I move forward? That may not be the majority, but we don't need to seek out the majority. We just need to find, sometimes even, you know, like one person or one couple or who have a similar thought process, and that can be so nourishing and enriching and stimulating.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Something else?
Well, also, it is a really good excuse. You know, I know someone who, she has a restraining order on her husband. So they just say, we took Vanaprastha. So it's kind of a glorious separation without the disgrace, you could say, of divorce and all of that. So it does happen. People take Vanaprastha because they don't get along, it's true. But it's a good way out, you can say, instead of an ugly divorce.
Yeah, it really is. This is something I've sometimes talked about and thought about. It's like our Pancha Dravida Maharaj was thinking of taking sannyas, and Prabhupada said, "Why do you want to take sannyas?" He said, "I can't get along with anyone." Prabhupada said, "That's a good reason," and give him sannyas. So for Vanaprastha, actually it's good. You see, there's so many devotees who in their later years don't feel so satisfied in family life. The relationship isn't, what should we say, delivering what we somehow hope for. It's not so pleasing. And again, because they're looking for a context, why am I not happy? Why isn't this working? So then they look and say, well, and they think about divorce, they think about something else. So this, in the Vedic system, it's sort of built in that, yeah, there'll come a time when your married life is not going to be so full of, that youthful joy. It'll be a different kind of life. And the taste that was there for working and building and growing and discovering materially will wane, and be, the household way of life won't be so rewarding. So that's a sign for us to move on. And yes, some devotees may just say, well, we're incompatible and da-da-da-da-da, and then they seek divorce or separation. Well, all right, somehow or other you broke the connection. And now the only thing you have to do is not make a new one. I thought of creating a new ISKCON ministry, the ISKCON Ministry for Creative Divorce, which would really be Vanaprastha in disguise. The idea is that if circumstantially, your spouse leaves you or expires, or for whatever other reason things go in different directions, just take it as a blessing. Take it as a blessing that at this point of my life, what was I expecting? It's like Narad Muni, his last attachment was his mother. She died. She was bitten by a snake. So rather than weeping and sobbing, Narad Muni took it as a blessing from the Lord, that now I can travel and follow the directions that I received from the sages, and he became Narad Muni. So if our family life isn't going so well, or it's not so jolly, or my wife wants to go live with somebody, with her sister or whatever it is, fine. Throws me out of the house or whatever it is. Just take it as a blessing and say, all right, this is really what I was supposed to be doing anyway. And maybe I didn't take a step forward to make it happen. Krishna's made it happen. So how wonderful, actually. And let me take advantage of it. Like Prabhupada said, the traders in the stock market, the prices go up or the prices go down. They take it as an opportunity for profit. The stocks go up, they sell and make money. When they go down, they buy cheap. So whichever way Krishna moves things, the devotee who's serious can take it as an advantage. Tulsi Priya had a question.
Hi, Maharaj. Just a comment, what you were talking about, the people realizing that they're not so pleased with family life. I had a friend who was...
A little slower, Tulsi Priya. Somehow, I guess you're speaking on your phone and the connection is, the quality is not that great.
I had a friend, she's a devotee, she was married, husband wasn't a devotee, and she raised several children. She was a very good mother. She was even a professional child care person. And as her children grew, they became less and less interested in Krishna consciousness. And
A little slower because it's really breaking up on your side.
or something. So her children became not inimical, but antithetical, or just disinterested in Krishna consciousness. Once they were all grown, she told me.
Hold on a second. Are you in the same place with the Kendra?
No, I'm in a different place.
Yeah, you're in a different place. It's so hard to hear you, Manaji.
Okay, how about?
Maybe you want to type it out.
Hold on, I'm going to turn off one speaker and use a different speaker because I have this on a speaker.
Okay, let's see if we do better.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, sorry about that. So I was saying my friend whose husband was a non-devotee, she was a nice devotee, very involved in the temple. As her children grew, they became less and less interested in Krishna consciousness and were living their lives, in a way that she didn't approve of. And she told me, I love my children. I'm very happy. I raised them. I'm glad if they're doing well. She says, but I'm sorry I had them. And she was just disappointed deeply. And I thought, wow, that's quite the impetus. But unfortunately, her husband wasn't a devotee either. So anyways, that was just something that you said made me think of that situation. My question is, when we're talking about the end of life, I seem to recall reading something that Prabhupada said that I think maybe somebody was very ill or something like that. They had a terminal illness. They were in a lot of pain. And Prabhupada said that if a person didn't want to live anymore, they could simply fast until death. And I was wondering if that's something that I don't know if you've heard of it, but if you think it's appropriate for when people are very old, sick, and tired, that they don't have to necessarily wait as long as they might have, that they can take matters into their own hands. And at least
can people who are sort of reaching the end take matters in their own hands, fast to death, and so on? A good question. Maharaj Pariksit, of course, is our example. He took up fasting until death. Of course, his fasting wasn't for the purpose of bringing on death, because his death was going to come anyway. But he did that. There is a tendency. I can give an example. I had an uncle, my mother's sister's husband, who was not spiritually inclined at all. But in his last days, he just didn't want to eat anymore. Didn't want to drink. He'd had it. He was this condition and that condition, and at a certain point, he just said enough and let me give up eating. Let me die. And then, of course, his daughters came. Oh, Daddy, please. But actually, it was the right decision. Why should I somehow or other just struggle on? It's not, as Prabhupada used to say, not required. At a certain point, one can do this. I had a paper written for me by one devotee who was something of a Vaidya and who gave me some scriptural things on this. Let's see if I can find it for you without too much effort. How about that? Came up right away. Prayopavesh, which means basically fasting to death. Let's see, coming up. Nice kirtan in the back. In the terminally ill, prana, the life force, becomes debilitated and begins to withdraw. from the Stula Sharira, the physical body. In most patients, this gradual retreat of prana is accomplished in an orderly fashion, with the life force withdrawing in set waves, from the periphery to the center, from the less vital to the more vital organs, and from the lower torso toward the head. Once prana has retreated from the physical body, the karmendriyas, the active senses, stop working. Then the second stage means withdrawal of prana into the sukshma sharira, the mind, intelligence, and false ego. And when prana retreats from the gyanendriyas, the knowledge-gathering senses, the patient loses awareness of the external environment and sinks into unconsciousness. I'm just reading along here. It's been a while since I've read this, but I think it's interesting, and it will get to the point. In the third stage, prana withdraws into the karana sharira, the causal body, consisting of ahankar. Because even the subtle body is incapable of exerting its organizing influence over the physical body through the prana, the four elemental states of matter begin to disintegrate. The bodily tissues lose cohesion, and the patient experiences a corresponding loss of body consciousness. Then the tatus, the bodily tissues in the liquid state, disperse, and so on and so on and so on. Ayurvedic practitioners aware of this orderly process can be helpful to patients and their families, assuaging their fears and reassuring them of the immortality of the jiva. Of course, palliative measures can be taken. Okay. Skipping a little bit. In terminal, there are two kinds of treatment, or two kinds of problems, diseases, those you can fix and those you can't. Then there, among those you can't, some you can manage and some are you can't. They're going to finish you off. So in those terminal conditions, Ayurveda considers only palliative measures. And then let's see what we have here. Okay, now I get to it. Prayopavesh. According to Shastra, suicide postpones and intensifies karma. However, as stated above, Ayurvedic ethics allow prayopavesh, voluntary death by fasting. The patient making such a decision must declare it publicly to distinguish the act from suicide committed privately in traumatic emotional states of anguish and despair, and to allow for family and religious community intervention. Prayopavesh is allowed when the patient is unable to perform normal bodily purification, death appears imminent, and pain and suffering are extreme, such that mitigating them would entail losing consciousness. Prayopavesh is gradual and allows the patient to reflect and reconsider his or her decision. After due deliberation, voluntary fasting unto death should be undertaken as sadhana, with the support of a community of faith. Let's see if there's anything else in here. There are various other things. But that's the relevant portion. The sum and substance of it is that, yes, it is acceptable to simply give up eating and go. It is acceptable.
The 11th canto also, description of Varnashram Dharma. If the Vanaprastha, oh, there's an echo, huh? If the Vanaprastha is, should I stop? Maybe if I move further. If the Vanaprastha is overtaken by old age and because of his trembling body is no longer able to execute his prescribed duties, he should place the sacrificial fire within his heart by meditation. Then, fixing his mind on me, he should enter into the fire and give up his body. The end of the purport, I guess Sri Dayananda Maharaj says, although this may not be possible in the modern age, we can appreciate the absolute seriousness of going back home, back to Godhead, as evidenced in this verse.
Yeah, and there's another place too where it's, or maybe it's the same place I'm thinking about, where it says that the Vanaprastha just, lets death come. But at least in these sort of terminal situations, it's not so, what would you say, strange or
Unreasonable.
Unreasonable. At a certain point, you just say, enough already. Let me go. There's no point in trying to extend life. It's not going to be extended. It's over. There's really nothing that can be done. The doctors have already admitted that, or should admit that, and so it's over. Now, let me go. Why should I eat? Even Prabhupada in his last days, there was a sort of a tug of war in one sense, or a loving tug of war between Prabhupada and his disciples, where Prabhupada sometimes you didn't want to go on eating, didn't want to go on drinking. He would sometimes say, don't force me. And he, it was like, that's in one sense what Prabhupada did. He just, whether by his own volition or because the body was not allowing, he reduced his eating down to practically nothing. He was just taking a little fruit juice. And you can't live like that. You can't go on indefinitely that way. So that's, in one sense, what Prabhupada did. And then when he wanted to go on parikrama, on the bullock cart, the Kaviraj said that he would die at the first bump. His body was so frail. Prabhupada said, I won't die, I'll live. He said, but if I die, well, that's expected. And if I live, it's wonderful. So to be willing in that way to let me go. What was that? Our Jayananda Prabhu. What is the use of this? Carrying on with this useless body. He had some money for treatment, and he gave it to Srila Prabhupada to publish a book, Nectar of Devotion. Why should I spend it for just fighting for a lost cause? Let me spend it for a noble cause. That means he wasn't attached to this, to that body. He saw that it's going to be over, and why should I fight to keep it going? So this becomes, we're talking about biology sort of telling us what to do. At a certain stage, biology says retire. At a certain stage, it says family life is not such a great kick anymore. And then at a certain stage, it says life isn't really worth pushing further. Let me prepare to go. And Prabhupada did that. He came to Vrindavan. He made various attempts to recover his health. And then he said, I've come to Vrindavan to leave this world. That was his intention. He didn't go to Vrindavan to recover his health. He went there because now it's over, basically. So that's the later stage. At some stage, we think, let me get free from my attachments. I can preach, I can do bhajan, I can do so many things. And then at a later stage, well, there's really nothing more that I can do. Let me go. Let me set my affairs in order. Let me give up my last attachments. Let me say my goodbyes. Let me go. So that's because we have to go. So rather than going kicking and screaming, we can embrace it. Krishna's kalosmi lokakshaya krit pravito. I come as death. So all right, if you've come, I accept your presence, and I'm ready to go. In that way, Dhruva Maharaj stepped on the head of death and entered Vaikuntha. We're just about out of time. Tulsi Priya has a question, a follow-up question.
Quick question. Would that sort of, I can understand based on what you're saying that it's, the body is starting to break down. It's understood that it's hopeless. There are conditions where the body can go on for a while, but life is not what we expect. Like I'm thinking of Alzheimer's. I've joked with people that if I got diagnosed Alzheimer's, I'd get on a plane, go to India and go for a swim in the Ganges and not come out. But I don't know if that's appropriate or if you're just supposed to tolerate the situation and everybody else around you also has to tolerate it.
It's an interesting question. That does sound like suicide. I've thought of such things myself. It is interesting to, not just interesting, it's something to think about. What would I do in such a state where in one sense it's worse than death, or where you can't, even the mind doesn't work, you don't even know who you are, what would you do? So as far as I can understand, suicide is not acceptable. One just has to put oneself in the best possible situation so that he'll be hearing the holy name of Krishna, be surrounded by devotees. That's what I would understand. Although, yeah, that's what I would understand.
Thank you. That settles the question for me.
Also, if you have Alzheimer's or dementia, you probably won't remember that you made that declaration to begin with.
Yes, that's also there. That yes.
True, but sometimes people get diagnosed early because things start slipping.
Yes, that's also.
Thank you.
I can think of several devotees who were really not in their proper minds in their last times, but they were Krishna conscious. They were Krishna conscious. They were Krishna conscious. So even though things may not be working, the mind is not properly working, one repeats the same thing again and again. There's one godbrother we had, Shamlal Prabhu, in South Africa, very nice devotee. And in his last days, he'd had a tumor, and it was a tumor. And so he was like in a loop. There'd be this sort of say the same small repertoire of things again and again, but they were all beautiful. It was all about Prabhupada, how wonderful Prabhupada was, how, something about Krishna, something about Prabhupada. So even though he was looping, it was such a beautiful transcendental loop. So another kind of mercy from Krishna. Actually, he lived much longer than the doctors expected, and that's how he spent his last days, just in a transcendental loop of Krishna consciousness.
Sounds like it was beneficial for others around him as well.
He was.
It reminds me of the.
And it wasn't just recitation, but his heart was in it. How wonderful Prabhupada is, how fortunate I am to have met such a bona fide spiritual master. It's just wonderful.
Mother Isha was like that, I think.
She was also chanting Hare Krishna in her last days. Yes. So we hope that somehow or other, what is that? Krishna Tadiya Parapankaja Pananta. All right, we're at 8 o'clock, and we do have the next program over on the Tuaco channel. Shall we meet again, or shall we bid goodbye? I'm happy to meet again if there are more questions and reflections from you. I don't think I have more that I need to set out. I've said my piece, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and your reflections. And Tulsi Priya, you had some idea of recruiting some active Vanaprasthas also to share their realizations. If you could work on that, that would be.
Yeah. I just need to get their contact info.
Okay, so I'm going to figure we'll keep going at least once more, and we'll see you then.
Thank
So
you.
is there?
One thing, like, it would be nice kind of for others to share any progress they've made since the beginning of this, seminar, you can say. What have we done in taking steps in the right direction that you have recommended? Because then that inspires others as well.
That would be wonderful. That comes like, those are realizations. Realization means that you apply what you've understood. Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you so much.
Hold it.
Again,
may I
say one thing?
Come next time that we hear more from one another and not just me holding forth and my own ideas.
I've been feeling
what I learned from Prabhupada. Yes, Apurva?
This Sangha is an essential part of our growing up in Krishna consciousness, and it's very enlivening. I'm just now starting to speak to some of my other God brothers and God sisters about what's going on here, and I think it's very vital. I would hope that it would just keep going and going and going, because we've just kind of barely touched the surface of what's
as far as applying everything.
Yeah, and then there's the applying aspect, but then
I think that's great.
I don't know if you're enrolled in the idea of continuing to lead us on through this.
I'm willing. I'm your servant.
As long as you have.
Because I look forward to it every Thursday, and I'm starting. I know Dukkha Huntry's on it. I was going to talk to Madhuha today about getting on, and I invited my godbrother Jagat Purush. There's so many of us that we're at this stage. It's a good forum for us to open up questions and hear answers, and also formulate what our next steps are going to be. Also, our God sister, Mother Bhumi, who's in the middle of getting ready to leave. We were hoping she would come on. She's at a very crucial point in her life.
All right. Ananga Manjari is speaking now over there in New Jersey. Everybody.
Well, let's go, and we'll come back. And I very much appreciate what you've said, Apurva Prabhu. I liked taking that sort of direction. So let's meet again Thursday, and now we'll go hear from Ananga Manjari.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Lakshman.
Everybody. Hare Krishna.
Hare Hare.